part of the semester and talk about ways in which it might be relevant to problem number 3. Okay, and then we can end with the more recent material. So first, the assignment. So you have it. It's obviously problem number 3: urban environmental justice issues in Tampa, due by 5 p.m. on Friday, December 6th. Some logistics. Please submit it in either Microsoft Word or PDF. You send it as an actual attachment. Do not send me your Google Docs link that requires some secret password to get into, or you don't think so, but it actually is, it really does. So send me, it actually has an attachment to an email, and put your name on the paper, because that's the only way I will know, how to give you credit. As I have mentioned before, I think it's in the syllabus, but there are 2 points behind that. One is it's a paper, it's not an exam. But the other thing is, a number of you have already started incrementally, but initially talking with me a little bit about some of your ideas or asking questions. But the idea is that what I want you to do is to engage in the problem solving and the analysis. I want this to be a good educational experience, not some sort of gotcha kind of like sometimes exams are, where you're like, oh, I studied all this material, and instead the exam doesn't look anything like what I thought it would. That's not the point. And so so then if it's not anonymous, then we can discuss, and you can ask me questions and so on and so forth. It probably is not possible to give everybody a detailed look at a draft. I just don't think there are enough hours to do that. So if I can't do it for everybody, I'm not going to do that. But you can bring your draft to me, or you can bring some specific kinds of things and ask particular questions, right? So obviously don't just send me your draft 2 days before it's due and say, is this an A quality paper, or if it's not, tell me what I need to say in it to. That's probably not just one image can't do that, because I couldn't do it for everyone. But if you're like, hey, this is what I'm thinking about this issue, is that sort of on the right track? Is there, or should I also be talking about this other thing? Then let's have those conversations. If you have very specific kinds of questions. I was a little unclear about, does the Clean Water Act Citizen Suit provision apply this way or that way, that kind of thing. Then, ask those kinds of questions and so forth. So that's the idea. It's, of course, open book, open note. You do not have to do any outside research to do an A+ job on this. Okay, the idea is that we have covered way enough to have a very thorough paper, right? The reality is that what we study in environmental law is introductory, and it is only a small fraction of all the environmental law that's out there. But there are people who practice environmental law for years who are still encountering and learning new parts of it. It's a vast field, and it's a very complex technical field. So there's no way that you're going to master all of environmental law in one 3-credit class in law school. It's just that wasn't the point of the class, right? So the point of the class is a couple things. One is an introductory overview with key themes and principles, key ways of thinking about problems through an environmental law lens. Okay, so that's one thing. The other thing is another is problem solving. Sort of being able to have the skill set to take a complex problem that a client has asked you to address and come up with solutions and strategies, right? So basically come up with a plan for how you might address some of the key aspects of it. Not totally everything that you would do, right? Of course, lots of follow-up that would happen in the real world to what you're producing, but to have a starting point, a set of solutions, or a strategy for addressing this complex problem. Third thing, of course, is the cultural competence component, is to either develop, or if you already spent time before this class developing, to then practice and exercise attention to diverse perspectives, trying to understand the different cultural perspectives that various parties might come to a problem with, and so forth. So to incorporate that into how you go about thinking of these problems and thinking about their solutions. Okay? So those are the 3 big things that the course is aimed to do. So in that, on that sort of thing, you do not have to go and do any further outside research. Okay? There is no, there's some article out there. If I just read that would be sort of the wow factor that will make all the difference. That's not, no. What I'm looking for is, have you been able to take what we've studied all semester long, you demonstrate understanding, ability to use it, and to apply it to solutions. That's what I'm looking for. But if you want to look things up on the internet, you can. If you want to go do research in the library, you can. So, right, if you feel like something you maybe don't totally understand, you want to just look at another source, okay, fine. That is totally fine. What you can't do is collaborate with anybody else. Okay? So you can talk with me, you can look at stuff. And when you're doing research on the internet, that does not include like chatting on Facebook Messenger with your classmates. Okay? That's not research on the internet, right? So just do your own work, right? And that's the key here. And so what you're going to do is you're going to prepare a strategy document or a plan or a set of solutions. I'm kind of using those loosely, synonymously, but that's sort of the general idea. And you can put that in whatever professional format works for you. Okay? So think about this. You're going to be using this as the assistant director, or you're the general counsel, of the Tampa Bay Justice Coalition. You want something that looks professional for the file. I don't care if it's a memo. I don't care if it's a report. I don't care if it's just you just start in and so forth. But it probably, both in terms of how well your analysis is, and in terms of your own ability to complete it successfully in the time available, you're going to need to be organized, right? You're going to need some structure to it. Again, there's lots of different structures that will work. I'm not looking for a particular structure, but structureless is difficult to follow, right? And it will be a difficult document for you to use if you want to. Obviously, you're going to go to class, but if you were doing this in the real world, right, that would be a difficult document for you to use. So try to use some structure. The other thing that's going to be expectation is that when you are referring to or applying law, you need to identify what the source of the law is. And again, you don't have to do any outside research. So the Saltzman and Thompson book, for example, may refer to Section 7 of the Endangered Species Act. It may not give the U.S. code number. It doesn't have to be the U.S. code number. If you're talking about the no jeopardy rule, you should refer to Section 7 of the Endangered Species Act. Once you refer to something, if you put an abbreviation in parentheses, you can use the abbreviation after that. That's totally fine. Okay? But A, I want to know that you know what the law is. And B, again, if this were the real world, you would need some way to refer back to it. Even if this is a not especially formal document, right? It's just an internal working document, you need to have some idea of what law you were talking about, right? So that's the main point of that. It doesn't have to be Blue Book. It can be in the text. It can be in a parentheses after your discussion. It can be in a footnote, an endnote, any number of things. So probably embedded video and audio is probably a little not so easy to do. But so there's probably some algorithms. I'm just being facetious here, right? But again, I don't really care that much as long as I can follow it. So let me stop with kind of the mechanics and ask if there's any questions. Okay, so let me then turn to a little bit more about how you might be how you're going to be evaluated and what some things that you will want to include. As we've been talking all along in terms of complex legal problem solving, you need to identify what the problem is, or that may be so there may be multiple ways of identifying the problem, multiple dimensions, but that's basically framing the problem, and then identify the issues. And those are exactly the same thing, right? The framing is sort of the broader picture, and incorporated into the framing are your client's goals. Okay? So you have a client, you have some specific goals. So when you're developing solutions and strategies, they need to be attentive oriented towards the client's goals, and your framing of the problem needs to be that. So then the issues, then of course you'll want to talk about the context. So there's environmental, social, political, economic, and institutional context. You want to be careful, because what you don't really want to do is just essentially retype everything that's in the problem into your set of solutions. The point is to focus more on the set of solutions. But your set of solutions will only make sense if there's some summary of the facts and the context in which the facts are made. So you want to sort of have some balance there. I think that probably 3 sentences is probably too short. But if half or more of your end product is just regurgitating the facts of the problem, that's not. You're spending too much time. You're spending too many words on that. Okay, does that make sense? It's really up to you what makes because part of this depends on how you frame the problem. But you want to think about which facts and which sort of broader context makes sense for how you're going to go about addressing the problem. Okay? But you've got them here, right? Again, you don't have to go and do a lot of outside research. I mean, you've got lots of good information about what's going on in the Tampa Bay area. Okay? But the bulk of it, of course, is a set of solutions and the analysis that goes into the solutions. And the analysis includes both legal analysis, the traditional applying legal rules to facts. Sometimes your application part may be more speculative. Like, for example, you may, for example, in terms of standing, you might identify that the members of the Tampa Bay Justice Coalition have actually used on a regular basis the environment that is an issue, right? I mean, but you don't know whether they have or not, right? Because all you're doing is saying, as we think prospectively about how we're going to address this, one of the things is if we sue and we have to establish standing, we're going to have to plead that, truthfully, that the plaintiff members of the Tampa Bay Justice Coalition actually use the environment that they are complaining is being adversely affected. Now, remember, that's primarily more for more for natural environment kinds of things. If they are being harmed, so for example, there is some sort of contaminated leaking Superfund site. Okay, that's pretty much easier to establish standing, right? If they live next door to a leaking contaminated Superfund site, right? They have a direct interest in having that site cleaned up, having the leakage stopped, because they are being directly exposed to the risk of right. You see, that's obviously much easier. In your groups are probably not complaining about a butterfly in Utah, but right, I mean. If they were, they would have to actually go visit Utah and look for and enjoy and appreciate the butterfly. Right? Does that make sense, everybody? So you don't have past facts to write, so you're simply saying this is how it would apply, right? Okay, that kind of thing. But then also you're going to need to do non-legal analysis as well. You're going to have to think about some of the beyond the traditional sort of rules and IRAC type of stuff. What else is going to have to be considered as part of a solution? Is that going to be some sort of multi-stakeholder collaboration? If so, what would that look like? There's going to be a public education and engagement component. What might that look like? Funding, okay? So funding's not really, for the most part, very law-like. It's more policy, right? I mean, there's choices. I mean, it's possible if Congress has dedicated the funding and it's not being used, then you could bring a lawsuit. But for the most part, things like funding is more policy-driven, okay? And so you just want to think about sort of beyond the law, how would you ideally integrate the non-legal strategies with the legal strategies. So, and then I want to give some attention to the rating rubric. Notice that there's a substantial portion, 30 possible points. There's really legal analysis involving principal rules and procedures of federal, state, and local environmental statutes and regulations in an integrated and analytically rigorous manner, blah, 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 some constitutional issues if they're relevant. Then 10 points for environmental problems and solutions in light of changing environmental laws and policies in the United States. We've talked several times in the class about how environmental law has changed over time. And so an environmental justice group like the Tampa Bay Justice Coalition, that's a challenge for them, right? That's, the fact that the laws aren't as static and there's sort of new generations and so forth. And we'll talk about that in just a second. Assessing environmental problems as part of larger systems. And there's lots of different ways you can go with this, but if you don't make any reference at all to the broader systems in which these problems occur, then that's a challenge. But they could be more ecosystem oriented. They could be more the fact that it's a metropolitan region, and so you've got it's more sort of geographic or community systems, right? There's political, and there's a lot of different ways. The law, the fact that you've got federalism and federal, state, local. There's lots of different ways to think about systems. And so I'm not saying here's a checklist of 17 systems that you have to talk about. That's not what I'm just saying. You need to depending on how you're analyzing the problem, you need to situate it in the broader set of systems. Diverse range of legal policy and social tools for addressing, compare and contrast, evaluate, and so forth. And so this is where you're looking at actual solutions, and you're integrating both the legal and non-legal, or you're at least including both the legal and non-legal, and making some assessment of how useful they might be to your client. And that's worth 20 points. Considering the problems from diverse perspectives, and so forth, identifies a variety of perspectives and so forth, that's 20 points. And then explores and demonstrates understanding of environmental problems from other cultures, demonstrates awareness of one's own cultural biases, and develops equitable, inclusive solutions to environmental problems, and that's worth 10 points. And obviously, this particular problem lends itself to that particular criteria as well, because presumably your clients particularly want equitable and inclusive solutions. That's part of what they're looking for. So, there's some things about you fail to put your name on the paper, you fail to cite your sources, etc. You submit things late, you submit the paper late, etc. And obviously, if you submit the paper more than 48 hours late, it's an F, so don't do that. But the main thing, don't submit the paper late. Okay? At some point, just submit what you have, because the point penalty ends up being significant enough. Now, if you need an extension because of something extraordinary that's come up, right, then contact me, give me some sort of somewhat detailed justification. Now, I can't get the paper done because I have a crisis. It's probably a little too vague in general, but I probably don't need to know every detail of your mother's trip to the hospital, right? So just give me enough that I can justify the extension, but contact me ahead of time. Don't let the deadline go, unless if you're in a car crash on the freeway or you're in the emergency room or whatever. Okay, at the soonest reasonable opportunity, let me know. But by and large, if something has come up, just try to reach out by email ahead of time and ask for the extension and so forth. But the idea is you just do it and get that. I'm going to talk a little bit about how you can plan your work most effectively. Okay, so I'll talk about that in just a second. But let me stop there and see what questions folks have.
Yes, this is our structure. I think one of the major things we're talking about is legal and non-legal analysis and sort of evaluating them together. Do we do like legal analysis and then non-legal analysis and then like a separate section where you're comparing them? Or?
Well, I think it really kind of depends more on your, really more on what the solution. So you're going to have a variety, or strategy, or whatever you want to call it, but you're going to probably have a variety of them, right? And so obviously if it's something like, I don't know, sue the pants off the EPA for violation of whatever or other, that's going to be mostly legal analysis. Now you might want some non-legal analysis about how you would follow up a lawsuit, or how you might go about sort of, bring the lawsuit, but also having some publicity about it so that it draws attention to the issue, right? So you could do some integration. That's going to be obviously a whole lot more legal analysis. If one of your solutions is create a collaborative problem-solving process in which you bring in all the multiple stakeholders, right? It's going to be almost all non-legal, but through your paper now you've got some of both. On the collaborative process, you might want to identify that there can be issues about the legal authority, especially if you have government agencies involved. What sort of authority do they have to implement the outcomes of that process, because this is sort of outside the normal. It's not notice and comment rulemaking, right? You see what I'm saying? So there can be some, but you don't have to be all the same. You don't have to sort of organize. Okay, I'm going to talk about legal. Now I'm going to talk about non-legal, and so forth. But does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Okay. I have a related question. So when we are listing our solutions, we don't have to necessarily say well, this is the one I would go with. We just need to say, my job is to come up with a list of solutions. It's up to the client at this point to decide. Okay, so when you say it's up to the client to decide, that's very client-centered, and that's also you might want to say a little bit more about that, but it's an opportunity to reflect that cultural competence that, hey, you're not going to take over your client's problem for them, and that you're not going to take power over their response away from these low-income communities of color, but instead you're going to present them with some options and so forth. I think your client's probably going to want a little bit more analysis or guidance, though, about what you think is going to be more effective, less effective if you do this. These are some of the likely outcomes, etc. So, to that extent, you can emphasize things that you think are better, and things that are less good, and so forth, or things that are more likely to produce outcomes, and those that they may be great ideas, but they may not be particularly effective. Right? So, so that kind of idea. So you definitely can make some assessments and judgments about your solutions, including comparative ones. One way of thinking about a lot of these environmental problems is, kind of goes back to that fourth generation, they're often sort of toolbox. Sort of multiple strategies or multiple solutions have to be used because none by themselves is effective. Now, if you think that's a bunch of silliness, that is, you do not have to do something like Arnold said, that's why I got parried. You can say, hey, we need to pick something. We've got limited resources, or there are, the idea that we're doing a whole bunch of different things is not the way to go. I'm perfectly fine with that, but having sort of saying, well, we probably do need to do multiple things ties in with some of the sort of analysis of how environmental problems get solved. So, other questions?
When we're talking about gentrification in our paper, is that something we can just mention, or should we delve into the issue? Because that could be a whole other paper.
So, I guess it kind of depends a little bit on what you mean by mention. I think the more rigorous analysis is gentrification and displacement, right? So you want to talk about that. Some gentrification ends up being desired by the marginalized communities that could be affected by it because they don't want their communities to remain deteriorated and economically hampered and that kind of stuff. They want to see new people, new businesses, new growth, and improved conditions and so forth. The problem is, at what point does that then become displacement? So I think that's important to give some attention to that. I think if you're talking about, you make a passing reference to it in a sentence, it's kind of hard to understand how it contributes to your analysis then, because there's more to it. But yeah, I mean, anybody could write 10,000 words on gentrification displacement alone. That would be overkill, right? And so you want to think about again how that particular aspect of the problem relates to solutions, because that's really what you're trying to do. You come up with a set of strategies or solutions. So what might you think could be a component of that? And we talked about several different kinds of things that could be considered, and so forth. There's actually a real range there that you can choose from, and so forth. And you might give some thought about what you think would be a good way of addressing the issues of surrounding gentrification displacement. But I think it's going to be an issue with the kinds of things that come up in the Tampa problem, whether it's brownfields cleanup, right, or green and blue infrastructure, because we know green gentrification is an issue. Those two big ones, climate change. We didn't talk a whole lot about this, but I did give you an extra reading that if you had been sort of based on the climate change reading we've done and the environmental justice reading we've done, there is a problem with that as communities generally deal with climate change, you may have some low-income communities of color that are especially vulnerable from where they live, but those that aren't, those that may be in places that are less, at least physically and environmentally vulnerable, now become targets for people to move to, right? And so because the wealthier people may, for example, retreat from the coast and end up in, so just example, they may retreat from the coast and end up in Ybor City, right? And now all of a sudden Ybor City changes sort of its basic sort of makeup and dynamic and so forth. So that kind of idea. So the article is about this happening in Miami. Okay, so that's a challenge. So there are some ways to incorporate that into some of the other issues. Okay. Okay, so one thing, though, that you're not going to be able to do, and you are not expected to do, is you are not going to be able to or expected to write about every possible dimension of the problem and every possible solution. Okay, again, environmental law is vast. These are major, complex problems. Okay, there is. I mean, this is not. There's there can be a tendency once you start working on this, like trying to take a drink from the fire hydrant, right? I mean, it's just like, oh my gosh, this is right. And so you're going to have to make some choices. You're going to have to sort of think through and make some choices. Your problem itself, makes clear some of the things that are most important to your client. So if your choice is to ignore pollution, brownfields, and Superfund altogether, I think that'd be a mistake. I mean, you're missing a big part of the problem. If, on the other hand, you never talk at all about whether the Endangered Species Act could be used to protect wildlife habitat in lower-income urban communities, I'm not even sure how relevant it is. Okay? I mean, I'm sure somebody, if we had lots of time when we were doing a research class, we could find examples of endangered species in more urban communities, urban neighborhoods in the Tampa Bay area. I don't know things. So if you never make any mention at all about the Endangered Species Act, fine. No. I mean that's perfectly okay. So in other words, you're gonna have to think through. Okay, what are the things that you want to address that you think are most important? What's the reasons why you've sort of focused on these things and so forth? Because again, you're only gonna have so much time. You only have so many words, and also your client is only gonna be able to do so much. And your client is not gonna take on. Okay, right. Let me stop and come back here. Okay, so you've seen government agencies and task force and commissions where they address a particular problem, right? And they produce a report, and there are 950 different recommendations, right? And some of them are little, having to do with how they buy staplers and more sustainable source, and then some of them are big about, this, we're going to reduce, uses of greenhouse gases by 32% in the next 5 years or whatever. But it's a big, huge list. Okay, that is not in your client's best interest. That's things that government entities do. Okay, that's not in your client's best interest because your client does not have that kind of bandwidth, that does, time, resources, energy, focus. So you should pick some things. You should be focused. Okay, if that makes sense. All right. Other questions? So let me next turn to some of the material that we talked about earlier in the semester and kind of just run through that and give some thoughts, because what you need to incorporate into your paper is not just the stuff that we've done in the last 2 or 3 weeks. You've got to go beyond that. And we talked about that from time to time, but I just want to emphasize. We started out with the Safe Drinking Water Act. Your problem refers to pollution. And it is acceptable. Depending on how you're approaching it, it may be a useful strategy to think about looking at disparities in the drinking water infrastructure, pipes and so on and so forth in the Tampa Bay area. That's legitimate. We don't really have any facts on that. So we can totally ignore the Safe Drinking Water Act. That's okay too. Okay? So that's really something where you can make a choice. But obviously, if you tackle it, then what aspects of the Safe Drinking Water Act would contribute to solutions? Can you sue the local water provider? Can you sue the EPA? Are there resources? So we talked about the revolving fund, right? Revolving loan fund, right? Okay, so for the health cities, okay, could that be used to target those? So that's some examples of how you might think through the Safe Drinking Water Act. But again, your facts don't suggest that there's anything disparate. Most of there are cities where that's definitely an issue. I don't know if it being an issue in Tampa Bay really could be. Or you may want to even just do set up as a solution, do some sort of investigation or assessment. Okay. Next, we talked about the 4 perspectives. So obviously one of them is environmental justice, so we just kind of come back around to that. But you are certainly free to make references to environmental rights, to sustainable development, and to cost-benefit analysis, or any of that. So that was the 4 perspectives. Obviously, you're using the legal problem-solving and cultural competence material, and you may want to just refer back to that material. It's very early in the semester, but it's 2 guides. We've used them all semester long, but you might just want to pull them up. Then we went into the basic structure of environmental law and all the sort of administrative law and constitutional law issues. If any of your solutions involve suing, especially a federal agency, those are going to be relevant, especially the standards of review, the APA. At what point do you have a claim that you can bring? Is there a final decision? That kind of thing. What's the standard of judicial review? Standing, ripeness, exhaustion of administrative remedies. All those will be relevant. At the time, it seemed like an awful lot of law, but actually, we keep talking about it, and it actually kind of boils down to a number of really key principles. If you are so a little bit, I think shortly after that, sometime or other, we talked about evolution of environmental law. And so one of the things that we did there was talk about the various changes that are underway in environmental law in the Trump administration or the Congress before it became divided between the House and the Senate. I don't think much of those changes are happening now, but I think we had the reading about the various kinds of changes. And so one way that you can bring those together, if you choose, if this is part of your solutions, is to think about which of those your client might want to join probably with others in challenging in court, right? I mean, so that might be has notice and comment rulemaking been followed? That's a pretty simple, straightforward analysis. I mean, either has or hasn't, but you can identify that because that's actually been an issue. Some of the things that have been done by executive order, can they really be done by executive order, or does the agency have to go through notice and comment rulemaking? And so that's to identify that you may want to be part of that, or to challenge the agency's revision or revocation of certain regulations because they're going to have an adverse impact on your client, right? The people in the communities whom you represent, and so that raises a whole variety of issues. But also, is the agency's decision arbitrary, capricious, and abuse of discretion, or otherwise not in accordance with the law? Well, what does that mean? It means that they have to have considered all the relevant factors. They have to have substantial evidence on the record to support their decision, right? I mean, all those kinds of things that we studied, and so you can talk about that. And that's one possible solution. Being a part of a sort of major litigation strategy against what's going on in sort of the changing federal environmental law and federal environmental regulations is, on one hand, sort of elevates the justice aspects of your client's problems, right? And so, on the other hand, it takes a fair amount of resources, and you're probably going to need partners with other communities that are likewise affected, right? I mean, in order to sort of shoulder that litigation, because that's pretty significant litigation, right? So those are some things to think about there. A couple other things that I think are worth pointing out. Those readings about the changes in environmental law, we already talked about the fourth generation, okay, so the idea of those generations and so forth, I think that's could be relevant. And the other thing is that some of those readings emphasize how private and local government action, particularly on climate change, has been where most of the action has been lately. The federal government has pretty much kind of backed off from that, and so we didn't repeat that reading when we got climate change, which you've already had, right? Okay, but that's just relevant, right? I mean, that maybe more attention might be given to the private sector and to local governments because that seems right now where the action really is. Okay? That reading had a bunch of examples and so forth. So that's just something to think about. Endangered species Act, as I mentioned, you could make a case for doing something there, but I don't know that it's especially relevant. Okay? So if you make no mention whatsoever of the Endangered Species Act, that is perfectly fine. NEPA, on the other hand, anytime you have a federal agency action, including federally funded, state, local, or private, or federally authorized state, local, or private. So if for example, you have your Superfund site cleanup, okay, that's going to be subject to NEPA, even if the cleanup's being done by the City of Tampa or by ABC Corporation, right? Okay, right. So because they're federal approvals that go into that, and so then the question is, so NEPA applies. Okay, so NEPA analysis is going to be, I think, probably a significant federal environmental law for your client, right? Because it involves environmental impact analysis, involves cumulative and synergistic impacts that your client wants considered, and it also involves public participation in information, which your client wants. Okay? So. And we won't go all the way through NEPA analysis again, but I think it's pretty relevant. Federal lands management, I don't see it. I mean, maybe it's there, but I don't. I mean, we're not talking about prairie dogs in the West. I mean, we're talking about urban area. There are some federal lands, but I also don't see that is really all that relevant to the environmental justice issues that your client is addressing. Multi-stakeholder collaboration is, I think, a possible solution. And so you could think through that. What does that mean? How does it work? What are some of the benefits? What are some of the detriments? What are some different ways of structuring that? How would you think about that? So, and you can't be just sort of, gee, we love multi-stakeholder collaboration in general. Which stakeholders? About what are you collaborating? How would it be organized and structured? You need to sort of think through that. So we have a fair amount of study and information about that you could apply. Conservation easements and land trusts. Possible. But again, I think it might be a somewhat more limited set of solutions. It's possible that you could incorporate some conservation easement and land trust elements into some sort of climate change strategy or into some sort of green and blue infrastructure conservation strategy. Okay, so say for example, you're talking about sort of neighborhood parks or something of that sort, and maybe they want, if they're private, privately owned, privately developed, would they be subject to some conservation easement? So you could think about that. But I think that for the most part, the kinds of issues we're talking about aren't overwhelmingly the sort of conservation easement and land trust sorts of issues. Clean Water Act. Okay, so Clean Water Act is a big statute, and some of the trials. So, all right. So, Clean Water Act. So there's that's again something you're going to have to make some choices about. How much do you want to focus on water quality in and around the communities? But you could, right? I mean, so the water qualities of sort of mostly surface waters in your in the neighborhoods that you're working with, and so the Clean Water Act has a variety of different options there. If you're focused more primarily on green and blue infrastructure, obviously wetlands are a part of that, and there is some piece of that where you have Section 404 of the Clean Water Act, which, even though it is Clean Water Act, it's almost sort of like a whole little topic in and of itself, because it's a very specific kind of regulatory regime there. So Section 404 of the Clean Water Act. And then we did more collaborative, multi-stakeholder problem solving, so that's and then pollution credit trading. So if you're doing clean water, you might address some of the environmental justice issues on pollution credit trading, right? So that's been an issue. A lot of the environmental justice groups are skeptical about pollution credit trading because often where the pollution ends up being more highly concentrated tends to be in their communities, okay? But again, that sort of depends on how much you want to focus on water quality issues, right? There's a lot of things to focus on, and you might be saying, hey, I really want to do more with brownfields and green infrastructure with that. So that's just an issue to think about. And then, of course, the more recent material. And I think that, as I mentioned a little bit ago, it would be I have a hard time imagining you not addressing circular brownfields and RCRA as well. So sort of the whole Superfund circular brownfields RCRA area, I think, is, based on the facts of the problem, relevant. One thing I just want to point out about the facts of the problem, if you pay close attention, there are a variety of brownfields being cleaned up by the state or under state law, under state direction. Actually, it's really local, it's at the county level, but there are a number of brownfields. But they are, if I remember off the top of my head, only about half of all the contaminated sites that are on the list. Okay, so it's not. I mean, so just because that you have this reading that says here are all these success stories doesn't mean that those communities are, everything's fine and dandy, right? It's only about half of them. Moreover, proportionate to how many of these brownfields are in low-income communities of color, you have a higher proportion in higher-income, non-minority areas being cleaned up. Okay, so in other words, more of the brownfields in the higher-income communities are getting cleaned up than in the. And I'm not talking about absolute number, I'm talking about percentage. The percentage, you just have more in the lower-income neighborhoods of color, and so that is a challenge. Obviously, environmental justice principles and solutions are relevant here, and we talked at great length about those. Climate change is an issue. You can have a particular climate strategy for your client, or you can integrate climate change considerations into other strategies. Okay, so either way, both have their merits. Okay, so either way is fine, just well, but either way. And then of course, renewable infrastructure is very much an issue, especially with tree canopy, urban heat, because we know both of those. There are significant disparities in communities in Tampa. So especially the trees, and especially anything that could mitigate the urban heat, which includes trees, but includes other things, green roofs and other strategies. So yeah.
So in this paper, kind of like what we did for the outline, are we supposed to just like list all the solutions that we can like come up with, and then are we allowed to say like C, if you're saying like public participation and community involvement, can you say like C solution 1 and like kind of like what
Yes, or in the same manner as discussed in solution 1, we would incorporate the same kinds of participatory strategies. So, exactly. Yes, you don't have to keep just repeating the same thing over and over again. So now some of the application might be different. So for example, standing, if you were challenging, say for example a change to some sort of Clean Water Act regulation would be different than standing challenging failure to prepare environmental impact statement, right? Because it's actually just much easier to have standing if you're challenging a failure to prepare environmental impact statement, because the entire public is the injured party, right? Because it's the part of the point is to inform the public, right? So so you don't want to get carried away and miss the fact that there might be some differences in your analysis. But in general, if it's the same kind of thing that you discussed in one solution, you can do it in another. And when we did the outline, I kind of went through and I just listed a bunch of solutions, and then I went through and did the analysis. You do not have to do it that way. Part of that was, and sort of, trying to get us to sort of think through how you go about thinking about that. If you have a clear structure, what your solutions are might appear obvious from that. You might, you have section solutions, and you have 1, 2, you have 1, blah, 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 analysis 2, blah, 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 and it becomes more obvious. A tool that can help you in your practice and help your client is to have an upfront list or to have a table of contents or some sort of summary outline overview at the beginning of your right. So that's a useful tool, but it's not required. Okay, I'm just saying, as long as I can follow what you're doing, you don't have to have a whole list and then go through the analysis. You can just do 1 analysis, 2 analysis, 3 analysis. Okay. Other questions? Okay, so let me talk a little bit about time management. Okay, so obviously this is sort of a larger, more complex project to tackle, and you're writing a paper. So I would strongly encourage you, especially since we don't have class next week, to spend some time in the next week or so, a week to 10 days, doing some A, outlining, and B, just putting some ideas down in a document. Okay, I mean, I would say on paper, but actually you can write it down by hand to begin with, and then eventually copy it, whatever works for you. Okay, but all I'm saying is I would spend some time now, while thoughts are fresh, and you're closer to having actually studied the material, rather than wait until December 4th and then sit down and say, oh my gosh, now I'm going to write the whole thing, and and it takes you a few hours just to get your mind back in the game, right? Because your mind's already in the game. So you might want to you probably don't want to write it all now, but if you don't want to do it, spend the time now, at least spend some time. Just and you got lots of other things going on. I totally get that, right? But anything that you can do now, even if you decide later you don't want to use it, you decide, okay, I need to change this, etc. You want to at least, I think, get a start on it. You need to plan for enough time to think, right? You need time to sort of strategize, to think through your analysis, what your solutions might be, etc., and also write. Okay, and I mentioned this before, but one of the danger zones for this type of paper is you spend an inordinate amount of time summarizing the problem, summarizing the facts and the context, okay? And that is, okay, it's like, honestly, it's like being under a warm blanket on a cold day. I mean, it really is. I mean, because it's comfortable, it's safe, because you have the problem. You have, right, and you just spend all this time, you have this beautiful, wonderful summary of the problem, okay? And then you're like, crap, I've got 2 hours to write the solutions and the analysis, right? And because you, that's I'm just telling you, that's a danger zone with this particular paper project. Don't do that. Don't do that. So, because you don't, that's, it may feel comfortable, but then when the cover comes off, and you've got to write the rest of it is all of a sudden very cold, and just plan ahead for technology problems, plan ahead for crises. Okay, this is the exact point at which your dog will decide that your Saltzman and Thompson book is a good thing to chew on. Okay, this is the exact time when your toilet or kitchen sink decides to leak. Right? We've all been there, right? I mean, all I'm saying is, if you put everything in just the amount of time that you need to get it done before the deadline, that's when things go awry. Okay? So build in some buffer. Build in some buffer for things going awry. Build in some buffer for, hey, I got down this line of thinking, and my thinking's now taking me in a different way, and I want to start back up. Build in buffer for, hey, I probably really ought to proofread this better before I turn it in. Right? I mean, all that kind of stuff. I'll say just build in some buffer. This is not like I need 6 hours to write this, so I will start this 6 hours before it's due. That is not a good strategy for this. Okay? So that's if you want to, it's your choice. You got, I'm not trying to force you into one thing or another, but I'm just telling you over the years, sort of my observations and experiences and so forth. That's kind of those are some of the things that I see that the students do that ends up not being so great for them. But also, you guys have been a great class, and it is entirely possible, and I hope that it is true for everybody in the class to earn an A. I do not. I mean, this is not some. There's no curve. There's no. I have to submit so many C minuses or whatever. Right. I'm going to grade it with a scale and based on the quality. And obviously, this tends to be because of the length, the depth, the complexity of the problem. This is one of these things where more is better, right? And that's just kind of the nature of it. Not just to pad what you're doing with a bunch of words, but to be thorough, right? To be thorough in what you're doing. But it is very doable to do a quality job on this. And in the end, this will serve you well. There are lots and lots of parts of practice law that are not this. Okay? There are times when you need to give a client a short, concise, straightforward answer. Boom, right? Can I do this? Yes or no? Just right. And your 10,000 word page memo is not what your client wants. Okay? So I just want to be clear. This is this is not everything. This is not the whole thing about practice of law. But there are times when this is exactly what your client needs, and that's the kind of nature of this course, is that we're tackling those kinds of problems and those kinds of strategy development. Other questions? Okay. Not two more things. One is there is more ice cream up here that is getting soft, so you all need to come up and eat more of it. And again, if you're not eating ice cream, I will try to be culturally competent and understand that perspective, but I don't understand. Secondly, is please complete the course evaluations. You can find them on Blackboard. Please, in the next 10 minutes, in the next day or two, please do. Don't forget, and so forth. But a couple things. One is the dean uses it. The dean looks at the numbers and how the numbers compare among professors. Reads all the comments, and those are part of our evaluation. So how I'm assessed on whether I'm doing a good job as a professor or not. The course evaluations are a big part of that, okay? And I know students sometimes are a little cynical about that, but I promise you, they appear in the annual evaluation letters every year. So I would appreciate it. And then when there are very few students who participate, the dean makes a point about that. And so strong participation is good. The other thing is I care deeply about your learning, and I appreciate positive feedback, things that tell me, okay, I'm on the right track, that you actually are learning something, and it's good. And also constructive ideas about, parts of the course that could be different or better or whatever. And tend to be on the whole pretty critical of myself. So every time that not just, I appreciate comments and emails and notes. People do that, and I love that. It makes a big difference. But it also helps if the administration is seeing that, because it ends up. You all know this. The university is overstretched and under-resourced, and so at times that gets a little discouraging. It gets discouraging for you, I know. Every time you pay your tuition, it gets discouraging. I understand that, but it also is helpful if the university administration, law school administration, see that you guys are learning things and stuff like that. So I would appreciate that. But please join. Come back and get more ice cream, and if there's still some left, somebody needs to take that. So I'm not taking it.
So I have a subtitle in the Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we're doing.
Yeah. Might not make sense.
No, that's okay.
These are like the slides, probably. Because I think this is really good.
Okay. Thank you so much. Do you have
I can do it. No, let's put it right now. I'm gonna miss you.
You'll see her again. She's like, I'll never see her again.
Probably won't see me in your class. Probably won't see me in your class.